Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jennifer Zarowski, and I'm the Library Media Instructional Technology Specialist in the West Appear School District. We have our monthly book talk on air today that we've been doing for the last few months, and it's our final one of the school year. We are out next Friday for the summer. This is a very special book talk today because we have a real live author joining us, Gayle Rosengren, the author of What the Moon Said. I'm sitting amongst hundreds of books at both schools that we are trying to feverishly get on the shelf, and that book is included in our order, and we have some students at each building that have read the book and have just loved it. So, Gayle, we appreciate you joining us today. We're going to start with Sophia, who's a fourth grader at Westwood Elementary that's read the book last week, and she's going to give a brief overview of the book and what it's about, and that's about it. So take it away, Sophia.
Okay, well, I'm Sophia, and my teacher is Mr. Plowman, and the title of my book is What the Moon Said. The book is about this little girl. Her name is Esther, and she's living in an apartment in Chicago, and they are kind of low on money, so they have to move to this big farm in Wisconsin. And when she gets there, she's kind of surprised how shabby the house is, and it's just not what she was looking for. But later, kind of in the book, she kind of realizes that she really likes it. She makes a new friend, Bethany, and it's just, she never wants to leave, and it's really good.
Awesome. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No.
No. Okay, awesome. So thanks for the overview, Sophia. We're going to pop over to Gayle Rosengren, who is the author of What the Moon Said, and she's going to talk a little bit today about her journey as an author and then a little bit about the book, and then we'll have some time for questions when we're done. So take it away, Gayle.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. This is really fun. I love talking to the actual readers of my books. That's a real joy for me. I'll just give you a quick kind of overview of how I came to write this particular book. I have always loved books. In fact, my earliest memory is me as maybe 3 years old, no older than that, and sitting and looking at a picture book and making up stories about the picture. So I was kind of creating stories even, certainly before I could write and even before I could read. I grew up, continued to love books. I did add two other things to the things that I loved, and that was dogs and horses. So I did eventually get a dog. I still am working on the horse. Haven't gotten that yet. But with books, I was able to have horses and dogs and have all kinds of adventures. When I was your age, 10 years old for 5th grade, I had several favorite books, and the cool thing about them was that when I opened them up and started reading, it was like the rest of the world just kind of fell away, and I was living in that book. Do any of you know that feeling? Yeah? That's the joy of reading. I think of libraries. I got the dog, I didn't get the horse, but I always had access to all the books that I could read because I had a library card. Do most of you have library cards? I would hope so. Yes. Yeah. And libraries are like passports to adventure, to any place, to finding out about anything. Or you can read fiction or nonfiction, and it has other things besides books even, right? It's got movies and other things too now. But for me, it was having that library card and being able to have those adventures. You open the covers of a book, and it's like stepping into another world, getting to know and make new friends, and have all kinds of different adventures, and even have a horse for a while. Okay? So I really loved that feeling so much, and I admired the authors who wrote those books so much that I wanted to do that when I grew up. I thought, this is really cool. But I had no idea how to go about doing that because we didn't have author visits or any kind of opportunity to meet a real author in those days. I say in those days, that makes me sound even more ancient than I am. But the fact of it is that you guys are really lucky, not necessarily to have me, but to be able to know that authors are real people, and they eat breakfast and they stay up too late at night sometimes, and they do all the same kind of things that you do. So I didn't know how to become a writer, but I knew that's what I wanted to be. And I always read. And I didn't realize that while I was reading, I was really preparing to be a writer. Because when you're reading, you're learning about writing without even realizing it. You are learning how things are done, and you have all these great examples that you sort of draw from almost instinctively. You're not really aware of it, but you're learning things. That's the best way to learn. When you don't have to sit and study it necessarily. Now, when I went to college, that's when I learned. I met authors for the first time, and that's when I learned what you can do if you're serious about being a writer. You take classes like for anything else. You learn things that are basic to different kinds of writing. Like there's writing fiction, and there's like journalism in newspapers, and there's writing nonfiction, and all kinds of others, scripts for movies, etc. But they all require a little different style, and those are the things you learn, along with just mechanics. You have to know, you're learning punctuation and things now, and it may seem boring to you sometimes, but it's really, really important. It's like you wouldn't go out driving a car if you didn't know the rules of the road and know when to stop and when to go and when to turn, or you'd get into an accident. Well, it's the same thing with writing. You need to know these basics in order to do it well and to have the words that you're saying come across and say them the way you want them to be understood. Okay? So I started writing then, and I ended up, after I got out of college, I started working on some short stories because I got married and I had children and I didn't have a lot of time. So I started with short stories, and those are good because they have just basically one simple plot and a limited number of characters, right? They're kind of probably like the stories that you write. They're not like hundreds of pages long. They're more like maybe 10 to 20 pages long.
Has anybody written a 10 to 20 page paper yet in 5th grade?
All right, well, we'll say 5 pages. How is that? But as you get, as you do it more and more, you're going to write a little bit longer pieces, and it's fine to short. The length really has nothing to do with it. It's what you're saying. It's how interesting it is and how well done it is. So I started writing short stories. They were printed in magazines, and that made me very excited because finally I was published. And I wanted, though, to write novels. That was my real dream, was to write novels for kids like you. And so I kept working at it, and as my kids grew up, I finally had a little more time and I could write longer things. It's hard to concentrate when you've got little ones running around the house. So when I got going, I did finish a couple of manuscripts, and I didn't really know what to do with them at first, but I joined a writing group, and I found out there's also books that can tell you where to find places to send it. And as you are maybe aspiring young authors, there are even books that include contests for young people, and there are also books that have a list of magazines where you can send your stories and maybe get them published. And if you ask your lovely librarian, she might be able to help you find some of those. What I went on to do was send those out. I found the editors at the right publishing houses that might be interested. And the problem was, yeah, sometimes the editors really liked them and they wanted to, even though they get like hundreds of manuscripts in a week, and they can only publish maybe 6 or 7 in a year. They had to really, really love a manuscript to take it on. So they would have to get approval, though, from what's called an acquisitions committee. And that's made up of more of the business people as well as other editors. And they're looking at whether it's going to be a good investment for them because they need to make sure they'll get their money back in sales. So anyhow, my book would get as far as the acquisitions committee many times, but not quite make it to being published, which was always very disappointing because, of course, I had my hopes up when the editor would like it, right? But I kept on writing, and years went by. I got a couple more dogs, and still didn't get the horse. And I thought, at one point, I decided to write a book that was inspired by some experiences that my mother had in her childhood. And I found some old photos, and I asked my mom lots of questions, and I took some of the things that happened to her, not necessarily all in one year or even all on the farm, but some of her experiences, and I kind of took a few liberties with some of them, but that's what writing fiction is all about. And I put them together into a story that I called Esthers Wish, but which was later retitled What the Moon Said. Okay? And when I was writing that book, I got the idea, okay, when you're writing a book or a story, what you want to do is that you're going to always start with, like, what if? What if this happened? You know, what if aliens landed in the schoolyard, right? During lunchtime, nobody would see them. No? But anyhow, so I asked the question, what if a girl during the Depression had to move from a comfortable apartment in the city of Chicago to an old ramshackle farm in Wisconsin when her father lost his job? And I thought, well, that sounded pretty interesting, but I had to come up with more ideas because just one what if is usually kind of, okay, that's your beginning of your story, but you need lots of what ifs to keep it interesting. So, and what you really need in order to keep it interesting is what we call conflict, and that's just another word for problems. And I gave poor Esther in the story, I gave her lots of problems, didn't I, Sophia? Yeah. First off, you have to understand, I decided, okay, I thought, okay, what if Esther's mother is very, very superstitious? Does everybody know what superstitious means? Like believing in good luck and bad luck and signs and things like that? Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, you know, it's the old step on a crack, break your mother's back, and don't walk under a ladder, which is always a good idea. Anyway, there might be paint on top or something. But, okay, so that was my other what if. And then I thought, what if Esther isn't really sure that her mother loves her? Okay, so that, her mother never hugs her, certainly never says, I love you. She's a rather, she's just what we would call an undemonstrative person in general. But Esther is really, really wanting to get that from her mother. So this becomes her goal, and she tries everything to make her mother give her a hug or a kiss or say I love you, something to reassure her. But what if a lot of her attempts actually kind of end up annoying her mother more than pleasing her? Certainly not getting the results that she wants. And what if, okay, some more little problems that I threw at her, what if she can't see the blackboard at school because she needs glasses and they can't afford them, and she gets in trouble because it looks like she's cheating by asking someone else to write down the problems for her? Well, she is cheating in a way because she gives the answers to that person as a thank you, right? She didn't think of it as cheating, though. What if they have a really, really hard winter and they're running out of food and they're cold all the time? And what if, on top of that, Esther gets really, really sick? And how do they get her to a doctor? They're out in the middle of nowhere and they don't have a car. So I gave poor Esther all these lots and lots of problems to make the story interesting. Did it work, Sophia?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what makes the story interesting. And when I finished writing the story, I passed it around to several people. I did not send it right to the editor because I know that sometimes writers can't see their own work as clearly as somebody else can. So I wanted to get other people's points of view to see if there was any place where it seemed kind of boring or if it wasn't quite clear what was going on, and that's what you use other readers for. And just like your teachers might say, you know, this part here is unclear, you should really write this over again. And rewriting, I have come to love it, but it's not a natural inclination. We usually don't like to do things over and over again, do we?
No.
But that's how your work gets better. And revising is a huge part of being a writer. You don't just sit down and write it and it comes out perfect the first time. You have to keep trying and keep reworking it, and hopefully you get at least close to perfect by the time you're done. And then you send it to the editor. And in this case, I gave it to an editor that I met at a conference who had seen the beginning of it and really, really fell in love with the character of Esther. And so I sent it off to her, and I crossed all my fingers and toes. And I waited, and I waited. Editors are not known for being speedy. And I waited, but she got back to me, and she said she loved it. And she wanted to take it to, guess where? The acquisitions committee. So I'm like, oh, I'm so hoping that it's going to work this time, but I've had nothing but bad experiences before. So again, I'm waiting and I'm waiting. But this time, she called me up and she said they loved it too, and they wanted to publish it. You're not kidding. I wanted to do cartwheels down the hallway. If I knew how, I would have.
You could have went out and bought your horse, Gayle.
Yeah, really. Yeah. So it was just an amazing day, and because I had made my dream come true finally, and it took a long time, and there were times I wanted to quit. I admit it, because well, it was very it was heartbreaking sometimes. It really was. Sometimes I get my hopes up so high, and then they were dashed, and then I would even cry, you know. I mean, it was just sad. But being stubborn or perseverant or whatever, I kept going. I kept trying, mostly because I loved writing. I loved the process. And I mean, I couldn't have kept going at something I didn't really love.
So can you tell the kids how long it took you to actually write the book, and then how long it took before it was accepted by the publishers? Because that's interesting.
Well, it took about 9 months, all totaled, with revisions and things, for it to be written. But then I had sent it around to a bunch of editors when it was first written, and a couple of them took it to their acquisitions committee, and at that time they didn't want it. So I put it in a drawer for a long time, and I wrote other things. And then finally it just was kind of nagging at me that I wanted to give it another shot. And I figured there were all new editors out there. It was okay to try it out again. And I did, and that's what happened. But that was 12, 13 years later.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and by the time and then it was another couple of years before it was actually published, because it's a long process to go from a manuscript to an actual book.
So now that we've talked to Gayle about her journey as an author and a little bit about the book and the story behind it, why don't we have some of the fifth graders come on in and ask some questions. Fifth graders from a bunch of different classes are in Miss Schwanke's class at Hemlock Creek Elementary, and they have some questions for you. So come on up, kiddos.
Oh, great.
Who's your favorite author today and why?
Well, it kind of changes all the time. I have favorites in general, but a favorite one is really, really hard. But I just recently read the one and only Ivan, and I really loved it.
Has anybody read that over there?
Raise your hand if you read that book.
I love that book.
Yeah.
Good.
Awesome one. Another awesome book is Wonder. Have any of you read that one?
Yes!
That's a huge favorite here.
And another one that I loved from several years ago by Kate T. Camillo is Because of Winn-Dixie. I don't know if any of you have read that one.
We read that in third grade.
Yeah. Oh, it's a little bit younger. So, yeah, those are some of my favorites, but I have lots more, too. I mean, I forget them as quick, I have favorite authors like Kate T. Camillo and now R.J. Palacio. I'm waiting to see what she does next.
Yeah, awesome. All right, what's another question from Miss Schwanke's class?
Who was your favorite author when you were growing up?
Ah, good one. Louisa May Alcott, probably. I loved Little Women, which is probably not something that turns, a boy on, but I saw a girl back there waving her hands. Have you read that one? Have you read Little Women?
No.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I love Little Women, and but I also there was a mystery series out then, and it was by Julie Campbell, and it was Trixie Belden was the main character. It was always Trixie Belden in The Secret of the Mansion, or Trixie Belden and the whatever. So there were about 20 books in this series. I really loved it, and I can give you a couple reasons why, and that was because it was the first time I read a mystery series where the characters seemed really real and not just like cardboard cutouts. And also because she lived in the country, which is something I, as a city girl, always wished for. And she not only had a dog, she had a best friend with horses. So it had it all,
Nice.
Mysteries, dogs, the horses that I never had. Yeah, so I'd have to say between the two of them, that was
Awesome.
one of my favorites.
All right, let's head to another question. Thanks, guys. What's the next one today?
How did you come up with the title?
What the Moon Said?
Yeah.
Very, very good question. I told you that it was originally titled Esthers Wish. I knew even at the time that there had to be a better title that was a little bit generic, right? It wasn't really exciting. But I just couldn't come up with anything. And it's the funniest thing, because the day that my editor called and said they would like to buy my book and publish it, she said, "We may want to change the title, though." And I said, that's fine. I knew we probably would. I said, I'll give it some more thought, and you give it some thought, and we'll see. And I went back to my desk, and as soon as I sat down, it came to me what the moon said. And the reason it's what the moon said is because of the superstitions and the signs that the mother read. A lot of them had to do with the moon. Like the very first chapter, the very first page, is saying how the moon had a ring around it the night before. Mm-hmm. So that means bad luck, is something bad is going to happen, mm-hmm. right? And that's when the dad loses his job, they find out. So I thought, since so many things in the book, because the moon comes in like 4 or 5 times, so many things had to do with the moon. It was what the moon said is kind of an intriguing title because, of course, the moon doesn't talk. But it did relate to what the book was about. What do you think? Is it a good title or not?
I like it.
Yeah, we like it.
Okay,
all
good.
Right, good questions. Coming from fifth grade.
Yeah.
Do you have another one?
I just wanted to say I really liked the book.
Oh, thank you.
I think you got a dog before, right?
Yeah.
Well, in the book, Esther was really happy when she got her dog. Do you think you were just as happy when you got your dog?
Oh, I was, because I had waited for years. It was funny. I used to cut out articles in the newspaper that said why every child should have a dog and give them to my mother. I begged for years, but my mom worked during the day, and she thought it would be mean to have a dog at home all day long by itself. So my grandmother moved in, the ma in the story. She had had a heart attack, and it really wasn't good for her to stay at home by herself anymore. And she moved in with us, and my brother, for the very next Christmas, which was just a couple months later, got a puppy and brought it in for me. It was a little black puppy with a big red bow around his neck, and he was kind of tripping over the bow as he walked in. And my grandmother took one look at it and said, "Nah, yeah, I move in and now you get a dog." She wasn't real thrilled about it, but she was very glad to have her after a while. They got to be good buddies. They kept each other company during the day.
Awesome. All right, I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. So, Ms. Schwanke, I don't know how many you have left, but probably 1 or 2?
Sure, yeah, we can do that.
All right.
Okay.
How do you think of the character's name?
Sit down.
All right. Esther was actually named after my mother in this instance. It was her story, and so much. And I thought Esther was an unusual enough name that it would be good to just keep it. I was afraid that they were going to want me to change her name, and so I was relieved that helped, because it's a very kind of unique name. You don't meet a lot of people named Esther, right? I bet there aren't any Esthers in your class, are there?
I don't think so.
No. So that was her. But in a lot of cases, sometimes I use baby books, name books, to look for names, especially if I wanted to have some kind of meaning. Like every once in a while I have a character that I'd like their name to have some sort of meaning behind it, like some, names do. So I get them from lots of places.
All right, 1 more question from the 5th graders, and then we'll wrap up today.
How many books have you written in,
Speak up.
How many books have you written?
Yeah, maybe we can comment.
How many have I written, or how many have I published? Okay, I've only had the one published. I've written several, and I have another one that's coming out with the same publisher.
Sophia's very excited here.
Yay! Thank you. That one is called Cold War on Maplewood Street. and it takes place during one week in 1962 when what was called the Cuban Missile Crisis was going on in the United States, and it was a really scary time. So, yeah.
Awesome. We'll have to make sure we add that one on the order list. I know we have some kiddos that would love to read it. Gayle has also been gracious enough to send us some labels with her signature in it. So if any of you buy the book or any books that she's written and we still have labels left, you're welcome to let me know, and I will give you one of those so you actually have a signed copy of your book, too. So thank you for doing that as well.
Thank you. Thank you. You guys have been wonderful. You're a great audience, and you really had some wonderful questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I knew the answers. It's always a little scary.
That is good. Well, we just wanted to thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate it, and it's really interesting hearing things from an author's perspective, and we look forward to having lots more students read your book. I think you piqued a lot of interest here as well. So thanks again, fifth graders. What do we say once again?
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.
Summer.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.